Good morning, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video update for Thursday, June the 14th, 2012. Tropical Storm Carlotta has developed as indicated by several of the global computer models over the last few days, part of the favorable MJO pulse that's moving through the Western Hemisphere and a nice monsoon trough of low pressure that is setting up in the Eastern Pacific that will try to work its way into portions of the Western Caribbean. The monsoon trough, simply think of it as a focusing mechanism for tropical development, like a grapevine, and you're looking to see if ripe grapes form on it or if there's just going to be lots of little seedlings. In this case, with Tropical Storm Carlotta here in the Southeast Pacific, definitely a ripe grape has formed, and now hurricane watch is in effect for portions of southern Mexico here as Carlotta forecast to become about an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane and move up into a track similar to that. I'll look at a track map in just a moment. You can see fairly decent outflow in all directions here for the most part, that clockwise fanning out of the upper level winds. I've talked about this before. You can't have the wind coming across in just one direction like that, because it'll blow the storm apart, tear it apart, shear like scissors. Instead, you have to have the air coming out in preferably all four quadrants of the storm at the upper levels to evacuate that rising air away from the storm like a chimney does in a fireplace. Looking at a closer picture of it, you can tell a pretty good banded structure to the system with lots of heavy convection around it. And there's the center of circulation buried in this deep convection, moving off towards the northwest, more than likely going to impact the coast of Mexico here as about an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane somewhere along the southern coast of Mexico. Hard to say exactly where this soon, but over the weekend, you folks from Friday, Saturday, into Sunday, you folks in Mexico need to be ready for this. The impacts from potentially a strengthening hurricane. I'm going to show you that the tropical cyclone heat potential is very high in this area, and we can see that here. Look at this right up against the coast. This is a phenomenon that we do not see in the Gulf of Mexico, for example. All the heat content in the Gulf is confined to the open areas of the Gulf, whereas here along the Pacific coast, the heat content butts up right against the coastline, getting into fairly high heat content, which is basically saying it's extra octane for this system to develop. Water temperatures 30 Celsius, 31 Celsius, getting into the upper 80s here along the coast of Mexico, right up against the coastline. So that's important. You guys in Mexico there need to be ready for this and prepare accordingly. In the Atlantic Basin, nothing but good news here. Pretty neat. You can see the satellite picture. This is a visible shot, and you can see Carlotta there in the lower left-hand corner. The outflow from it indicating strong upper-level winds on the other side into the Atlantic Basin, and then those cut across as such, cutting off any chances of development. This is a signature of dry, stable air out in the tropical Atlantic, and nothing at all in the Gulf of Mexico. I don't see any development chances over the next several days. However, speaking of the MJO, this is the forecast for the Madden-Julian oscillation over the next couple of weeks from the GFS operational and the GFS ensemble mean, both of them indicating that the MJO would be in the Western Hemisphere and the Africa region, this Section 1 I call it, that's what it's called, for the next couple of weeks. So there is a window of development opportunity for about the next 2 weeks in the Atlantic Basin and Southeast Pacific. That it's still June, though, is sort of arguing against development. We typically don't see a lot of development in June. However, it won't surprise me if we see one area pop up, and I'm going to go back to this other satellite picture. I'll be watching this area right here for possible development in about a week as this mess down here kind of gets left behind and some of that energy bleeds over into the Bay of Campeche. This is the area that the computer models, the global models, seem to be focusing on right here for possible development in and after about a week from now, mainly related to this favorable MJO pulse that is hanging out in the Western Hemisphere. But nothing to worry about in the Atlantic Basin for now. So you guys in Mexico, do keep an eye on Carlotta. It could ramp up. You know how these things can go. It could get a lot stronger than is forecast. And I say that not to scare you, but to merely point out that intensity forecasting from the National Hurricane Center, as they would readily admit, is the least amount of skill. That's where the least amount of skill exists. And these things can go much stronger than forecast. They can be much weaker than forecast. That's why it's important to take each one of them seriously. All right, so there you have it. You're up to date now for Thursday, the 14th of June. I'm Mark Sudduth. My website is hurricanetrack.com. Glad to contribute to Hurricane and Hurricane HD. I'll be back with another update tomorrow.